Hi guys, so in this video we're going to look at a selection of responses to white's first moves that you can have as an opening repertoire when you're playing with the black pieces. So here, as always in Chess Boot Camp, we're talking to beginners and improving players who want to break through the 1,000 rating point barrier and start climbing up the ratings, okay? So we are not master level players. We don't need to have memorized responses to every possible opening. I think that in general, if you've got a few kind of opening systems in your pocket, combining that with a general understanding of opening principles, so developing towards the center, controlling the center, getting your minor pieces out, and making sure that you don't blunder, making sure that you don't hang pieces and make silly mistakes early on, that for us should be enough to stand you in good stead. You don't want to be memorizing pages and pages and pages of theory. You just don't need to do that at this level. So in this short video, I'm going to give you a few suggestions, and one of the big principles here is that I find it really helps to try and wrong foot your opponent when they're playing with the white pieces and they get the first move as early as possible, right? Because none of your opponents are going to have loads and loads of preparation, loads and loads of theory stored in their brains either. So I think it works really well here to have a few approaches which will let you knock white out of their comfort zone and get you into your comfort zone where you are a bit more familiar. Okay, but we don't want to be learning whole books worth of theory. So let's get started. So I've got the chess.com Explorer up here, and I've filtered it down to my games that are played at rapid time formats, because I want to exclude the blitz where I'm just messing around and having fun, and where I'm playing black. And one of the things you'll notice first of all is that 1e4 is overwhelmingly the most popular opening. Now, first move for white. Now at master level, then d4 is a lot closer to that, okay? But for us, 1e4 is going to be by far and away the most common first move. So in this video, I'm going to look at e4 and I'm going to look at d4, and we really don't need to worry too much about the others, but we will talk about that in a bit. Okay, so let's start with 1e4, by far the most common opening first move for white at this point in time. So against 1e4, I've got a couple of suggestions. The first one is playing d5. As you can see here, it's actually I've got three responses that I've played a fair bit in the past, all in the 200 to 300 range, but the most successful for me has actually been d5, okay? And this is the Scandinavian. Now, you can see overwhelmingly 2/3 of the time, then white will capture on there. Now, the traditional continuation for the Scandinavian, the kind of classical way forward, is for the queen to capture on d5, right? But that very often, or almost always, will just prompt white to play knight to c3, kicking your queen away. And I mean, there are a few different ways that the queen can go, but back to d8, you've lost time. White's got a piece out in the board already. I don't really like to do this, but the approach that I take, as you can see on here, overwhelmingly is to play the modern variation, which is knight to f6. Okay, so I'm attacking the extra knight that white has after accepting the gambited pawn. Now, what I'm looking for very often is, you can see here, c4 has been played 45 times, knight to c3 has been played a few times. If knight to c3, very often I'll take, knight takes, and then I take with my queen. And you can see that white has 0 development. I've got a queen out in the board, yes, but that does give me some attacking opportunities. And as you can see on here, I tend to do pretty well in this variation. But the other common response for move 3 is this. So by playing c4, white is trying to, it's another way to try and hang on to this piece, and that's generally not advisable when you accept a gambit, trying to hang on to your material, because that's quite often what black or what your opponent wants you to do. Okay, so I like to see this, and as you can see, I've got a 60% success rate with this. Now what I play is e6, and overwhelmingly white will capture on there. Then what I do is I recapture with the bishop, and now you can see white's got one pawn out in the board. I've got two pieces. I've got two minor pieces already out in the board, and this also lays the groundwork for the Icelandic Gambit, which in fact this is what it is. And I've actually got a video on the Icelandic Gambit that you can check out with a few example games. Now, what we're trying to do with the Icelandic Gambit, so let's say what's d3 and b3 are common continuations, trying to protect this pawn, which makes sense. So let's say they play d3, queen e7. You can go for this now, or you can maybe develop a bishop or develop your knight, for example. So sometimes I might like to do this. I might like to develop my knight, and then I'm trying to trick my opponent into thinking that I'm planning to castle queenside. Okay, so a3 has been played and g3 has been played. Let's say they just play a move like that. Okay, now what I do is I move my queen to e7. Okay, and I'm trying to, like I say, trick my opponent into thinking that my next move is going to be castling, but it isn't. Okay, so in this game he played bishop to d2, and here's the idea. Bishop to c4 with a discovered check against the white king. So now white has to respond to this. I'm just one step away from castling with this rook on a lovely semi-open file. I've just grabbed that pawn, and I've really got very, very good initiative in this game. So the Scandinavian Defence can be pretty good. I don't recommend the classical line as such, but this modern variation with the Icelandic Palm Gambit has worked very, very well for me in the past. So let's go back to the beginning, and let's think about other responses to 1e4. So the thing that I've been practicing more recently, just trying to expand my range, has been the French defence, which is this one with e6. Now I haven't had such amazing results from that, but still pretty good. I'm running at 57% wins against 40% losses. So here's the French. Very often, most often, half the time, white responds with d4, grabbing the center. That all makes sense, right? They're getting control over these central squares. Then you play d5. And you can see that most players at this level will, I mean, there are two main options. There's e takes d5, which is the exchange variation that has a dull reputation. But more often than not, at this level, you'll get the advanced variation with pushing to e5. The response then is c5, and we're building up quite a nice pawn structure here. White absolutely should not be capturing this pawn because they're giving up one of their central pawns, and it lets you develop your dark squared bishop for free. And that dark squared bishop is now looking down at the f2 square, which is white's Achilles heel. So yeah, they generally won't do that. So we'll quite often see moves like c3, then you bring your knight out. We've got knight to f3 here, defending these pawns. I'll quite often develop my bishop there. The queen's going to come maybe to b6. So you'll be targeting this pawn quite often towards the start of the game. If white does something like he has done a couple of times, bishop to e3, sorry, that's bishop to e3 there. Bishop to d3 has been played a couple of times. Then, and you bring your queen out. Now you've actually, because the queen is now blocked by that bishop, now you've got three attackers on that pawn against white's two defenders. So I do recommend the French. It's a lot of fun. you can get some good attacking opportunities. f6 is quite often another pawn break that you can make, defended by the knight and stuff like that. So the French is pretty cool, and more importantly, white will not be expecting the French. I quite often see this when I play 1e6. I quite often see my opponent taking some time thinking, now this is an unusual one, this is not really what I expected. I don't recommend playing e5 in response to e4, although it is by far the most common response, certainly at this level. I think at the master level you get a lot more Sicilians with 1c5. In fact, I think that may be the most popular response to 1e4. But I don't play the Sicilian. I've never played the Sicilian. I don't need to play the Sicilian because I've got other responses. So you don't need to have this like massive bank of repertoire. But the issue with 1e5 is that it's what white is expecting most of the time, and then you are still in their territory, right? But we don't want to be playing to white's strengths, because so you might end up with, for example, knight to f3, knight to c6, and then white still has the initiative, so might play the Italian game, or might play the Spanish game, or may have other ideas. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to wrest the initiative away from white as soon as possible, and I think the French is a great way to do that. So e6 and make them think, okay? And this is the great thing, that when you play the French, you will get the same kind of patterns, the same kind of structures on the board over and over again. So you can start to learn the attacking options, you can start to learn the pitfalls and everything like that, and your opponent probably doesn't, because your opponent may have been intending to play the Scotch or the Italian or whatever, right? But this is a really good way to take that initiative away from white. So now, so we've had 939 games where people have started with 1e4 against me. Now let's look at 1d4, which is a lot less common at this level. Okay, now we've got a few options for playing against this. What I've been learning recently is the Dutch defence, and I've got a video on that as well. But if you look at f5 on here, yeah, so f5, I've actually got a 61% success rate. So that's pretty awesome. So the Dutch goes like this. You'll very often, let's see what the most common moves are. c4, preparing to bring this knight out to c3. I'll play e6. Okay, let's just click through. Knight to c3, knight to f6. You do need to be careful if the e-pawn moves. You want to watch out for this queen coming down with checking ideas and harassing the king, particularly if this knight comes out as well. So if this knight is allowed to here, for example, and then the queen comes down like this, you've got options of, because if you play knight to g6, then the knight can grab this and you can be in all kinds of trouble. So you do need to be careful about that, but you'll learn that kind of thing when you play the same opening system over and over again. Okay, so the most common continuations now, knight to f3. I bring my bishop out, so I'm preparing to castle kingside. Bishop comes out, and I generally try and fianchetto this light square bishop, so it's looking down at white's kingside there. e3, fianchetto the bishop. Okay, he brings his bishop out, you castle, and then you've got ideas of bringing your queen out to e8 and then to h5, and combining with this fianchettoed bishop, maybe even bringing your knight in, maybe bringing your rook in, lifting the rook, bring that across into the attack. You've got some really fun ideas about attacking down that king side. So I do definitely recommend the Dutch. There's a few variations of it as well. You've got the classical Dutch where d6 is played with the intention of pushing e5 at some point. You've got the Stonewall Dutch where d5 is played. That's not one that I've studied or practiced so far, but I may look into it. So a really good idea against d4 is to play f5 and get into the Dutch. because your opponent will not be expecting that. And if your opponent wants to go ahead and like play the London system, that works absolutely fine. The Dutch is a really good response to the London system, but it will get you again into your comfort zone and will not be what white is expecting. Okay, so a couple of other things that I want to recommend as well. If we click back, so looking at this again, we have D6 is actually my most common response to D4. Okay, I've got a 49% success rate with this. And if we click back again and look at E4 opening, again D6 has historically been my most common response to E4 as well. And this is interesting. And again, I've got 48% success rate with that, so pretty strong. And what this is, this will usually transpose into the same thing. So you'll play that, and then D4 by far and away the most common response. Okay, so what this is the Black Lion opening. And very few people really play this, but Grandmaster Simon Williams, the Ginger GM, has done a lot of work into exploring this opening system. He's got some free videos out on there that you can find. He's also got an in-depth course if you're really, really keen on, and you can afford to buy a full course on it. It's a pretty awesome system. So what happens then is you'll bring your knight out here. So let's click through some normal moves. Knight to c3, knight b goes to d7. And this is all looking right now, it's all looking pretty compact and quiet on black side. Might bring out another knight. And then e5 is played. So after you've made some moves. Sometimes they'll push d5, sometimes they'll wait there. Quite often at this level they'll do the exchange, but let's do this. So I'll quite often play like this. And then the idea is that you'll put your queen on c7. Okay, your bishop comes to e7, but you're not going to castle straight away. Okay, white plays whatever white plays, and you're going to play h6 and you're going to play g5. And then what happens is that this knight here comes around to f8 after the bishop's moved, then it comes to g6 behind this pawn, and then it's going to come in here. So like 3 hops for the knight. And again, this is a great little system. You'll very, very often get to play the same, the first 12 or 13 moves pretty predictably. So this is something that I would recommend actually as a pretty successful response either to e4 or to 1d4 as well. So that works pretty well. Now let's briefly talk about everything else. So if I click back, so we've got 939 e4s, we've got 283 d4s. There's nothing else really that, everything else is marginal apart from that. So what I would recommend, say starting with knight to f3, one thing that you can do, as you can see here, I've played d5 and won 69% of the games. Okay, I would recommend against all the other stuff, apart from probably the English, which is 1c4, I'd recommend the reversed London system. So if you play the London system as white, which is a very, very solid way to go and is played at every level of chess, then you can also play it as black. You just have to remember that your bishops are on different colours and stuff like that. So just like normal, your bishop comes out, your queen's bishop comes out, you build your little pyramid. So you've got this pyramid which is now on the light squares rather than the black squares, and if you were doing it as white. And you bring your knights out as normal, bring your bishop out like that. So you can play the London system very successfully as black as well. So if that's something that you are interested in studying as white, if you want to start with 1d4, then you can do the same thing as black, and I've done it, as you can see, with very good results. So that's basically my abbreviated takeaway opening repertoire for black. Obviously this is what I enjoy playing. I like playing aggressive openings where possible. I like to trick my opponents. I like traps and stuff like that. So use this as inspiration. Use it as a starting point for your own chess progression. I hope it's helpful for you, and I hope you have some success. But the biggest tips are, don't try and learn everything. Don't try and learn a response to everything that white can throw at you. Focus on a few opening systems, learn them in depth, learn the strengths, the weaknesses, the threats and everything like that. And more importantly than anything else, I think at this level of chess, trying to knock white off his balance as early as possible, generally a good idea. That's what I like to do, and I've had quite a lot of success doing it. So hope this has been useful for you. Let me know how you get on. All right, see you next time.